In the new Halo Infinite 8-minute gameplay trailer, we finally get a glimpse at the latest antagonist, Escharum, a brute claiming to be the victor over humanity's fall since the previous Halo games. In his debut, his monologue divulges his character and motive, and thus gives the audience a first impression. I am confident in saying that to me, his first impression is not as great as I hoped.
The UNSC lost this war months ago. Your people are broken, scattered, hunted, defeated by me. I wish I could tell you it was difficult, but it wasn't. We are one step ahead, always. The ring is already under our control. Soon, the auditorium as well. The Harbinger and the Banished share the same goal. We fight together to honor the will of Atriox. But without challenge, I grew weary, lost, alone. But here you now stand. This is my last fight. A true test of legends. Our story will outlive us both. Set a fire in your heart, Spartan. Bare your fangs. Fight hard. Die well.
Is he a threat? Objectively, yes, he is the only villain being put in front of us right now, so it's difficult to say if there are any other threats at all at this point. The problem that I see, though, is that nothing in his debut came off as threatening or gave reason to fear or even respect him, so his first impression as a villain is actually quite weak. This is actually quite a departure from the previous villains in Halo, let alone 343 Industries' Halo villains. For now, we're going to focus on the Halo villains from 343 Industries because we can all agree that the Bungie-era Halo games were definitely the golden age standard for what we expect from Halo going forward. With that said, let's compare the first impressions from the previous Halo antagonists that 343 introduced, starting with Esharum's object of reverence, Atriox. In Halo Wars 2, our first encounter with the antagonist Atriox is met with a brief yet shuddering speech which I believe many Halo, or specifically Halo Wars fans, can still remember from that cutscene.
As I suspected, nothing but a man.
Red Team Leader, this is Recon 1. You have multiple hostiles approaching your location.
Alice, we're leaving. Command, this is Red Team. We have a Spartan casualty.
Hunt them down.
Immediate evac requested.
Find out where they came from.
Douglas, stay with me.
And bring me back anything
Douglas!
useful.
As I suspected, nothing but a man. One sentence, and we already have more than enough information about his character. Here's a brute who thinks, who schemes, who plans, and has suspicions. Nothing but a man. That condescending statement already puts him on a mental pedestal over his enemies. He doesn't fear the Spartans like the previous Covenant feared the Spartans. You now have a new enemy who doesn't fear you, the player in this case. The very next sentence solidifies his intent and perspective. He says, "Yes, run, little demons. He's putting them down because he knows he has the upper hand. He knows their history, but now that he knows what they really are, he has no reason to fear them. He then goes on to say, hunt them down, find out where they came from, and bring me back anything useful. He aims to kill, he glorifies a hunt, he values intelligence, and he always thinks of growth, expansion, and supplies, which is something that a commander of an army kinda wants to do. This is an amazing first impression of a formidable villain. Less than a minute of talking, and you know everything you need to know about how he thinks, what he wants, and how big of a threat he poses. Of course Escharum is going to revere this brute because Atriox is an actual legend from brute history. In Halo 5, the mutual antagonist between Blue Team and Locke's team is the Warden Eternal. Here we have a character who is actually quite simple, but still demands a certain respect from those he interacts with. Our first impression of the Warden gives us a very clear blueprint of who and what he is. Just listen to his brief introduction statements.
She calls the Guardians to serve her.
What was that?
Your presence in the Guardians' shelter is undesirable.
Are you the Guardian?
I am Warden Eternal. I stand in service to Cortana.
Cortana?
The other humans are approved for passage. Regretfully, you are not.
That sounds like a threat.
Vacate his shelter now.
That was a threat, all right.
Notice how his first statement isn't about himself. This actually makes sense because his whole purpose for existing relies upon someone else. He is a servant. He exemplifies purpose. He does not talk menacingly, but rather conveys a more intelligent caution. He's warning them. He's not quick to pull a trigger. He is not violent, but will properly follow protocol in service to his master. In his same identification statement, he makes sure to also identify his purpose, which is to serve Cortana. He says those two things as if they were both who he is. He is Warden Eternal, he is servant. He knows his purpose and serves it well. This is a character who is so simple-minded, but still has such a commanding presence in his debut that you can't help but feel threatened and cautious at everything he does. You already know enough about this character, despite this character not showing any signs of any further depth or origins. You don't need that much information in this story because there are parallel storylines happening all at once, and we all kind of know where they all ended up anyways. Atriox and Warden Eternal both had very short introductions, but still portrayed much more threat and respect than Escharum did, despite Esharum's talk time lasting almost 5 times longer. You want to know the best introductory speech that any of the villains had before this? Surprisingly, it also came from 343. Here is honestly one of my favorite video game villain introductions.
So fades the great harvest of my betrayal. Even these beasts recognize what you were oblivious to, human. Your nobility has blinded you, as ever. The librarian left little to chance, didn't she? Turning my own guardians, my own world, against me. But what hubris to believe she could protect her pets from me forever. If you haven't mastered even these primitives, then man has not attained the mantle.
Your ascendance may yet be prevented. Time was your ally, human. But now it has abandoned you. The Foreigners have returned. This tomb is now yours.
So fades the great harvest of my betrayal. Every time he speaks, he fills each breath with conviction and does so in such a wonderfully poetic way that you can't help but want him to keep speaking. His first monologue unveils so much story and immediately begs more questions. He has been betrayed. He thinks himself a god. He wants to prevent humanity from ascending. There is a whole story behind every sentence he mutters. You are seeing him for the first time, and everything he exudes is just glowing with this villainous aura. I absolutely love it. Everything in this scene, from how he gets up, to how he dons his armor, to how his physical gestures subjugate the room to his will, he is the villain. The power, the command, and most importantly his speech, all of it tells you just how big a threat he poses, and he demands respect when facing him. Let's use these same methods from Atriox's Warden Eternals and the Didact's examples to uncover the personality of Escharum. Escharum brags a lot. 40% of his speech is listing the failures of humanity to defeat him. He lists everything he's accomplished and is currently exerting dominance over. The dude can't stop bragging about himself, and he only stops when he's praising Atriox, but even that is because he's boasting about how he is honoring the will of Atriox. He doesn't really have a purpose. The reason for his actions are to honor Atriox, but he admits that without challenge, he feels lost and alone. For a warrior, that actually is kind of sad, but let's say he is this powerful and mighty warrior that could defeat armies so easily, and let's agree that he is actually lonely without a good fight. If that is his only motive, his whole reason for existing in this storyline, for being the poster boy of the enemy faction in Halo, if that is the depth of his character, then I'm sorry to say, but it is quite shallow in comparison. Now, here's some actual good things about his character that I appreciate. The villain has a unique look, and even has several identifiable traits. But he has a certain grumbling breath as an audio cue. It reminds me of Darth Vader's breath. That one sound could send chills down your spine whenever you heard it. You didn't even have to see the character to be scared. I suspect that we'll be hearing Esharum's catchphrase, or I guess in this case, a catch breath, in the future, which would actually be pretty cool to lead into some kind of dialogue or cutscene, because when you hear that unique breath, you know he's coming. Remember, this whole thing is about first impressions. I could be totally wrong about Escharum when the full game comes out in a few months. Maybe there's a whole slew of lore and cutscene and dialogue and a fully fleshed out origin story that makes him look like a total badass, and I hope for that. But when you compare the first impressions of every other villain or antagonist that 343 has put in front of us, Escharum definitely hits the softest. Escharum does have potential to be refined into a great villain and a great character overall because of the incredible space and depth that Halo Infinite itself has at its disposal. But a stone is harder to carve when the first strike makes an ugly crack. The same is true of first impressions.